Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So welcome to the challenges and benefits of raising bilingual children. This presentation is being sponsored by the Family Network and the Family Consultation Service. I'm Malahat Beg Amin, and I'm a clinician and counselor for the Family Consultation Service. Our team at FCS are also here in the audience today, and if you wouldn't mind just standing up. We have Rua Hijazi, who's a counselor, and Marine Tibu, who is our case manager. You were provided with some handouts and an evaluation, so if you could please complete the evaluation before leaving today, we would greatly appreciate it. All right, so quickly, just a little bit about FCS. It is a confidential counseling program provided to you by the Family Network, and it is a free service. It is for spouses, dependents, and for dependents and domestic partners. So we hope you can pick up some flyers and brochures, and if anyone in your family would be interested, please make sure that they understand that there is a service for them. So we have an informative program for you today. We will have a 40-minute presentation and 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A after the presentation. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished guest speaker, Pilar Alfaro Palacio. Pilar is a psychotherapist and a school counselor for the Montgomery Public Schools. She is a native from Peru and a native Spanish speaker. In Peru, she attended a French-Canadian school where she was introduced to both English and French. Early on in her life, she moved to Washington, D.C. area, later with her family, and intimately understands what it is like to live between two cultures. She has 3 bilingual daughters, and she has received her bachelor's in psychology from George Washington University and a master's in psychology from Loyola University. She's specialized training in family, marriage, and therapy from the Family Therapy Practice Center in DC. She maintains a private practice in Bethesda and Chevy Chase, Maryland. Pilar.
So good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. And let's see, I have been here at the bank a couple of times before, thanks to Elizabeth's invitations. But this is the first time I'm presenting on the bilingual brain. I must say that by training, I am a marriage and family therapist, and I also have a master's in education, and I am a school counselor, though I have a slightly different position right now. And you can ask me any questions about marriage and family therapy or school counseling, but I am not I'm not a neuro-linguistic specialist, and I'm not a neurologist, and I'm not what I am not. So I am who I am, and I'm pleased to be here, so you are welcome. The first question I want to ask you is, how many of you, I'm assuming most of you, if not all of you, are bilingual. So I'm just curious to know how many of you speak, other than English, speak French. If you could raise your hand, please, just to have an idea. Wow, the majority of you, so this is very interesting. How about Portuguese, if you don't mind? Okay. How about German, maybe? Oh, thank you. Ooh, thank you. So German, I'm sorry, can you raise your hands again? Okay. What other languages are the most popular here at the bank? Oh, of course, Spanish. What am I saying? Spanish. I'm sorry. Wow. Okay. All right. Sorry. Woo. I'm so Spanish. I missed Spanish. All right. So that gives me an idea of who's in the audience. Secondly, I'd like to ask you, how many of you are here because you're interested as parents? Raise your hands. All of you. Okay. How many of you have children between the ages of 0 and 5? The majority. Okay. How about 5 to 10? Okay. 10 to 15? That's a challenging time. And 15 and older? Okay. Great. That gives me an idea of who's in the audience. Okie doke. So, this is my clicker. So we're going to talk about, and thank you for the This helps me move. So we're going to talk about all the many faces of bilinguals. Is it safe to assume that everybody here in the audience speaks another language other than English? Yes? Yes, everybody, all of us. So we're one big family where all of us speak at least 2 languages. Any trilinguals in the audience? Raise your hand if you're trilingual. Okay, just a little bit. Oh, that's what this is about. Okay, so here we go. All right, so language. So what is language? Language is basically essential to human life, to all human life. It is also known as the prism through which we see and understand, and that it's a special talent that gives us vast expressive power, isn't it? There are people who are not able to speak orally, but anybody here who signs? No one signs? Okay, that is quite a talent as well, but oftentimes we fail to realize how our oral language is a talent. It is a talent. Language, moving on, exists in every society. It is also language that symbolizes a cultural reality, isn't it? And it's a system of signs, and speakers view their language as a symbol of their social identity. So if I think of something I like to eat as an American, because I was born in Peru, but I've been in this country many years, I will think of what comes to mind if I think of American food. That is, let's say peanut butter and jelly, right? Bam. So if I think of it as a Peruvian, ceviche. Most of you know ceviche. So we have representations of our cultures through language, but language comes in 2 parts. The active part of language refers to speaking and writing. So this is what's going to define you as a monolingual or as a bilingual, right? So active refers to speaking and writing, and passive refers to listening and reading. So when we're talking about, well, we're going to get to defining bilingualism, but think about these 2, think about these 4 elements of language: speaking, writing, listening, and reading. All right. So there we are. Some of us speak 1, 2, 3. Some of us might speak 4. Especially here at the World Bank, many people speak many languages. And I think we need to really rejoice in the fact that we speak more than 1 language. We really need to rejoice on that. We're very special people, and you'll see why. All right. So what does it mean to be bilingual? So a bilingual person is a person who knows, understands, and uses 2 or more languages. But it's also a person who has the ability to speak, read, write, and even understand 1 other language. And what I mean by that is I may not speak or write Portuguese, but I understand Portuguese. I know there are some Portuguese-speaking people. So I can't consider myself a Portuguese-speaking person. I can't do that. But can I understand? Yes. Do I feel comfortable? Yeah, drinking caipirinha and, all that good stuff? Absolutely. I can totally blend. So I may not be fluent reading or writing, but I can blend because I understand. Also, bilingual people have the ability of thinking, feeling, and speaking in 2 languages. So you can think of this. If you can laugh at comedy in another language, trust me, you are bilingual. If you have ever if you've ever dreamt, now I'm thinking dreamed or dreamt, if you have ever dreamt in another language, you are bilingual. So it's a matter of thinking, feeling, and speaking in 2 languages. And it's also a person who is bilingual, and this is important to understand. So bilingual individuals struggle with the painful question of identity. So if you have questions of whether you are French, or whether you are American, or whether you are German, or whether you are something else, trust me, you are bilingual. Lastly, I think it's very important to think about this. Listen to this. A person who is bilingual is not the sum of 2 monolinguals, but a unique speaker and hearer in his or her own right. So as a bilingual person, I'm not the sum of my Peruvian, and listen to me, I'm not saying Spanish, but my identity as a Peruvian person, or my identity as an American, meaning from the U.S. person. I'm not the sum of 2 cultures or two languages, but rather I am who I am as a person, and I am the sum of those two languages and those two cultures. So that's also an important distinction to make. I'll tell you something. When I was about 15 or 16, and this is a personal story, my mom used to make fun of me when I translated from English to Spanish, and they used to make me read every Hallmark card there was. Oh, Peely, you translate the card, you know, because my mom liked to hear me translate from English to Spanish just to see how I translated the sentiment from English into Spanish. Sometimes I was accurate, sometimes I made it up. So anyway, that was something that went on for a while until one day it dawned on me. Something funny happened to me, and I said, gee, I'm not liking too much that my mother is making me translate these cards. And maybe it's because I'm not doing it right. It's just a thought that crossed my mind. And, you know, the more I thought about it, the less I liked what was going on. And one day I had the courage of telling my mother, look, I may speak English beautifully, like a native, because I was born in Peru, but I went to a French-Canadian school, as Mala had mentioned, and then I lived in Chicago for a year and a half while Dad was doing graduate school, then went back to Peru where I was introduced to French, and then came back to this. So I've traveled quite a bit, as most of you have. So anyway, my English was pretty impeccable, but so was my Spanish. And I told my mother one day, I don't know how this happened, but I said, look, Mom, I'm tired of you criticizing me or making me do this and laughing. I really resent the fact that when it's convenient, you have me translate, right? I'm the American. You go talk to the lady. I don't want this I want this other thing or whatever, more complicated things. And when it's convenient, you kiss every single person that walks in this door. And you say hello with a kiss to everybody that comes. And you have to be very polite, and you have to give somebody your seat. So whenever it was convenient for my mom, I was as American as they got. And whenever it was convenient, I was Peruvian. So I came to the realization that I did not appreciate being called one thing or another. I told my mom, I said, look, I don't care what you think of me, but I'm not one and I'm not the other, and just accept me who I am. I am a bilingual person. I'm a bicultural adolescent. Imagine being an adolescent on top of being bilingual. I mean, it's very hard for children, and having the courage to speak to my mother like this. So had I been entirely monolingual and had I been entirely monocultural, I don't think I would have dared to talk to my mother like that. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's complicated being bilingual, and it's complicated being bicultural. But we'll get to the benefits. Okay, so bilingual or multicultural people are able to develop the ability to separate languages as well as cultures. I think that goes without saying. The majority of people in the world speak more than one language. Yay, that's us. That's us. All right, so very quickly, monolinguals in general, they're about 40% of the world, bilingual 43% of the world, and trilingual 13% of the world. So those of you who are trilingual, you're very, very, very special. And this is some statistics, and I have to apologize because this is a little bit outdated, but I think the importance here is to look at the difference between the European Union and what happens in the United States. So if you look at the percentage of bilingual people in Europe, we're at 56%, correct? And with effort, and this is broken down by countries, and with effort in the United States, in 1980, the percentage was at 10.97. So let's say 11%. And with effort in 2007, and that's why I said this is outdated, in 2007, it's almost double, not quite double, but at 19.73. So, I mean, this is nothing that you didn't already know. Let's start talking about culture, language, and culture. So it is said that when you speak a language, you speak a culture. Hence, when you speak many languages, you really speak many cultures, yes? So, for example, if I say, Elizabeth, how would you say my watch doesn't work in French?
Ma montre ne fonctionne pas.
Ne fonctionne pas. Another way of saying my watch doesn't work. Or how does my watch work?
Ma montre ne marche pas.
Ma montre ne marche pas. In Spanish, how do you say in Spanish, mi reloj no funciona? What's another way of saying, Mi reloj dejó de funcionar. Can we also say, no se paró mi reloj? Se paró, right? So in French, ne marche pas, right? In Spanish, se paró. O no anda, anda is walk. And in English, what do we say? And how do we say it in English? Doesn't work, stopped, or what else? Stopped what? Stopped running? Stopped running, right? Stopped running. So sometimes, when, and this is what I'm referring to, when we speak a language, we somewhat speak a culture as well. So in French, it's march. In Spanish, it's, walk, no anda, or se paró, it stopped. In English, it stopped running. So we pull those words to represent different aspects of our culture. Let's see. So if you see me, I'm a little bit out of breath. I'm challenged with a health issue, so I'm not usually like this. But here I go. So let's see. Bicultural identity is the condition of being oneself regarding the combination of two cultures. So imagine, I'm going to put myself in as an example. I was a product of the combination of two cultures, right? And my identity, I robbed a little bit from both cultures to be me. So bicultural identity is the condition of being oneself. Once I realized what was happening to me, I stood up and I said, I am not one and I'm not the other. I'm both. So having that being a product of the combination of two cultures, it is also the successful understanding and incorporation of two or more cultures. So let me give you an example of how I made peace with myself. So when my children were little and I had to celebrate birthday parties, let's say at my house or wherever I celebrated birthday parties, I had to make two different cards. So the birthday cards that went to my daughter's school friends said 3:00, let's say. The birthday invitations that I sent to my personal friends from, where, South America, or relatives, the time said 1:30. And with effort, they got there by 3. And I'm not kidding. With respect, I did this. But this is how I was able to incorporate aspects of both cultures. I had to. I wanted them all at the same time, and if I didn't do that, I knew I was in trouble. All right? Let's see what else. All right, so language and culture. Bicultural people, and this is what I did, and I'm sure what you do, take part of in varying degrees of the two cultures. So you pick and choose what you take and what you negotiate or what you keep, correct? You pick and choose those things that you're willing to negotiate. This is especially challenging for bicultural couples if you're married to someone from another culture. So if my husband had been American, we would have really ended up doing what I ended up doing, is really sending 2 different cards just to make everybody happy. They adopt, at least in part, their attitudes, behaviors, values, etc., to those cultures. All right. Let's see. So what are the implications for transmission of culture? When you think about it, the easiest way to transfer culture is by language, correct? But if language is not enough, I guarantee you, if you think about this, for example, in the example of ceviche, how could I say no to a good ceviche? I couldn't. And my mother knew what to make me a part of the culture, correct? And not to mention music. I mean, think about how music influences your culture. And, interestingly, when I came to the United States, I was 15. So I had only gone to a few 15 quinceañera parties, with all the salsa and all that good stuff. Well, to this day, because I love to dance, I dance whatever music you put, I dance. So this is a combination of my culture and who I am as a person. Do you follow? And that's what we end up doing. We take our own traits and we combine them with aspects of culture, and that's what makes us be who we are. So the bilingual brain, I'm going to go quickly on this because I think this is not so practical but important for you to know. So the bilingual brain, thanks to brain imaging technology, they have found that it is the left part of the brain that is responsible for the use of language in adults. Not so for babies, not so for children, especially for babies. They have found that when babies speak, and this is all through MRIs and specialized imaging technology, it is their entire brain that lights up. It's more than one part of their brain that is used. So adults, one part. Babies, different parts of the brain. So when you think about why is it so much easier for babies to learn another language, it's that when babies are being stimulated by their parents, they're taking note of all the different intonations, all the different sounds. And when they're babies, not only can they hear the ma, me, ma, all the different, similar sounds, but different intonations perhaps, they're able to imitate that. We're not able to hear them. We're not able to imitate them. So for babies, it's a lot easier than it is for us. Well, so for babies, as they use the different parts of their brain, it is also known that their brains have a lot more plasticity. And what plasticity is just basically, it's like elasticity, right? So what we refer to brain plasticity is the ability to make connections in different parts of the brain. Make multiple connections. So, si yo empiezo a hablar en español, para las que hablan español, definitivamente cambia mi tono de voz, right? So my tone of voice changes. Si yo empiezo a hablar en español, va a ser así. Moi, si je parle français, okay, va a ser otra cosa. See, it's going to be something different. So, again, even si ustedes me escuchan en un idioma, and then I speak Spanish, and then si hablo, si je parle français, son tres cosas distintas. There are three different parts of my brain that are being used, and hence my voice is also different. Isn't that interesting? So, all right, so that's on the brain. So just to continue on the topic, children between the ages of 6 and 8 months are known to have celestial openness, and that means infinite capabilities of reception, if you will. And this is what I explained. By the age of 7, the ability to hear and imitate sounds definitely diminishes, and so is the plasticity of their brains. That also declines. One thing that is really important for all of us is that the bilingual brain is really trained to focus and refocus. So let's say that I separated these groups by languages. If I sat with the Spanish group, I could, trust me, I could be listening to the Spanish group, but my ear would probably go and try to pick up on the French. It would go and try to pick up on the English, yes? But if I concentrate and I say, no, I'm only going to listen to the Spanish, okay, then I can do it, but I'm also able to focus on the other ones because I can. Do you know what I mean? It's like having different antennae. So what happens is through this exercise, we're trained to focus and refocus. We're also able to filter out unnecessary information. We're trained to do that, to filter unnecessary information. This switching between tasks is a common affair. This happens all the time. We're problem solving, all of which are tasks that are attributed to the executive functioning area of the brain. So this area, this executive functioning of the brain, is the part that is responsible for impulse control. Impulse control. So what happens is that one of the research says that one of the advantages bilingual children have when compared to monolingual children is that they have a better ability to self-control. They have a better ability to control their impulses. Isn't that interesting? So there, maybe another time I'll come and I'll talk about ADHD, attention deficit disorder, with or without hyperactivity. But this is a very, very, very interesting point. So this is when children are bilingual, children are compared to monolingual children. All right. So I think this is a bit of a repetition. But what the takeaway from this slide, I think, is this. We're constantly challenging our brains to forge new pathways. And this is what we call neuroplasticity. So if I think of the word bread, pan and pan, right, in French, bread. So if I ask you to think of your favorite bread from your first culture, in culture, let's say culture 1, I'm referring to your first language. English is your second language. So let's say I ask you to think of the shape and the color or the texture of your favorite bread, type of bread. How many do you think I'm going to have in this room? How many different types do you think I'm going to find in this room? Many, correct? If I say it in French, if I say it in English, if I say it in Portuguese, if I say it in German, enfim, or Chinese, or Korean, or Urdu, any language, we're going to have different pictures. And if the experiences we have the power to change our minds and our brains, right? We have this capacity. If I say French, croissant. If I say, what can I say? My idea of bread from Peru, pan francés. It's called French bread, but it really isn't French bread. It's just called pan francés. So you see what I mean? If we have that ability to do that, then the mere exercise of going from language 1 to language 2 makes our brain pathways to expand and connect. So if you are a bilingual person, without you knowing, you have two constructs. You have two ways of seeing things. You have the ability, the capacity, because you have two worlds in your head, so to speak. Yeah? Okay. So this is just a picture of the difference between a brain of a monolingual versus a bilingual, and all it means is that there's more activity of neurons, or more density of neurons that are active in a bilingual brain in comparison to a monolingual brain. Now, this is a snapshot. For those of you who are monolingual, if there are any, I don't mean to criticize anybody. This is just research, and these are the facts. I'm glad you laughed. Before coming, I think I told Malahid, I said, gee, before I give a talk or before I present on a topic, I have 2 or 3 archetypes, or my angels, that I carry with me wherever I go, especially when I speak, because it's not very easy to remember all this information. So I said, I always take with me the Dalai Lama. Just why? Because he's a man who's so knowledgeable and yet so simple. So simple. So I like to bring that with me. I bring my dad, who was a very intellectual person who knew a lot about many things. And I said, I need to bring someone for a sense of humor. So I brought my husband. He makes me laugh all the time. All right. Good. I'm glad you're laughing. That's what it's all about. All right. So benefits of the bilingual brain. Language involves the entire brain, certainly. Bilinguals have 2 constructs at all times, and that's what I was mentioning a bit ago. Being bilingual rewires your brain, and it improves your attention. It really improves your attention. It makes the brain complex and actively engaged. It also delays the slowing down of the brain on aging process. Listen to this. Studies show that delays in Alzheimer's and dementia by 3 to 5 years. So what happens is that when you're using your brain, going from language 1 to language 2 to language 3, these exercises, these almost Olympiad-style exercises are keeping your brain younger. So if not for anything else, those of you who are cultivating a second or a third or a fourth language, carry on. All right. So ultimately, being bilingual may not make you smarter, but it'll make your brain healthier. Yeah? Are you with me? Okay. Convinced? Sold. All right. So what are the challenges of being bilingual? So it's not all glories. It's not all, it isn't really. I mean, for one, I think the issue of identity. When you are truly bilingual, this issue of identity can be challenging, isn't it? We have to pick and choose what we're taking, what values, what we're taking from each one of the cultures. So many years ago, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years ago, there was a myth. And the myth was that making children bilingual was a detriment, was not good. It was not good for children to speak 2 languages when they were little, because it was only going to confuse them, or it was only going to make them language delayed, right? or it was not the best thing for them if they were going to live in America. Let's just keep our native language away, and let's have our kids and ourselves as parents speaking English, because that way they will fit in better with the culture. They will not be discriminated against, or they will not suffer what we are suffering. But unfortunately, that thinking has gone away. What is true is that when children are little, it may cause some confusion. And I need to ask you, for those of you who have little children, please be patient, because I would say up until the age of 5, it is almost appropriate for children to switch languages. And children can be confused at an early age. It may also cause them to experience some language delays. And for that, I will tell you, please tell your teachers, your children's teachers, that your children are being raised in a bilingual household, so that they don't think that they're truly language delayed. While their peers, their monolingual English-speaking peers, are learning lit, table, chair, lamp, etc. in one language, these other children are having to learn them in 2 languages. So teachers need to be considerate of that. All right, may cause delay and word retrieval. And they've made comparisons between monolingual and bilingual children in word retrieval. And yes, I think bilingual children, and even us, are a bit at a disadvantage, because we have to perhaps we have to pull from our 2 different word banks, correct? Monolingual people have 1 word bank. And oftentimes, their 1 word bank is more extensive than ours, because we have it in 2 languages. I can't think of an example right now, but the vocabulary, here it is. The vocabulary or word bank of a bilingual person is usually smaller than one of a monolingual person, because that monolingual person knows everything they know in 1 language. But there's some things in Spanish that cannot be translated to English, and nor would it be appropriate or timely or necessary. And my word bank might be smaller. I'll give you an example. What happens to me on Mondays, for example, if I have spoken Spanish all weekend, doesn't always happen, but when it happens, I come to work. I mean, I know you can relate, and it's like I have to write a difficult email, and I'm like, okay, so I, delete, start again, and then I can't I know what I want to say, but I'm not saying exactly what I want to say. And what's happening is that I'm going from language 1 to language 2, and there's also common day language versus academic language. So when you come to the World Bank and you really have to write, you have to craft your emails carefully, you have to think twice. So think about the mental tiredness that goes with being bilingual, of being professional and being professional in 2 languages. It's pretty exhausting. It is exhausting. All right. So, the other thing is that, when you're bilingual, you kind of have to choose which one of the 2 languages you feel more comfortable with. So I could feel more comfortable socializing in 1 language, but my work or my professional, favorite language might be English, because I'm working in an English-speaking country, right? So we have to choose. And so, like, if I'm going to happy hour after work and I have to switch languages, I have to take a take 2 on this, because I'm really switching. I'm really switching. I'm pulling from a different area of my brain. All right. So tips for raising bilingual children. Do not mix languages. So if you are from, let's say, France, since there are so many of you, and your husband is from China, let's say. If mom is from France, what language did I say? What did I just say? France? Okay. So if mom is French, please, mom, speak to your child in French. If dad is Chinese, dad, please talk to your child in Chinese if you're interested in raising your children bilingually. Why? Because when you speak your own native language, no one better than you to teach that language, correct? And it's also important for the child to know, to make that distinction. Mama French, so I'm going to respond to mom in French. I'm going to make my sounds in French when I speak with mom. Dad Chinese, bam, I'm going to the intonations are going to change, and I have dad Chinese, mom French. So it's very important to keep that consistency, research says. Second tip is that it's important that you speak from your heart. Don't pretend. You know, if you really are a native Portuguese speaker, talk to your child in Portuguese, sing to your child in Portuguese, love your child in Portuguese, whatever language you feel comfortable with. I'll tell you something, when my children were little, my husband learned English when he was an adult pretty much, and he has an accent. If you only knew how much I'm talking about him. And he used to read, The Little Train That Could, what is that book? The Little Engine That Could, right? Choo Choo and all that. Okay, so he read that book to the children before they went to bed in the most loving way. But the intonation did not match what the story was saying. Until one day, my daughter said to me, Mom, I think you better read to us at night. And I said, why? Daddy talks funny. Daddy reads funny. And I didn't know what they meant until one day I listened to my husband reading to him. So that's the point. If you're going to stimulate your children, do it in your favorite language, and do it from your heart. Okay, third tip, and I already said this, right? It's important to tell the teachers that you're raising your children in a bilingual environment. God forbid should they not know that. And all right. So, and I already said this too, as your child is learning to speak, it's appropriate to do that word switching that I mentioned earlier. All right, cultural aspects of bilingualism are important. Decide for your child which language will be spoken in the home. And be consistent. So if you have to negotiate between you and your spouse, make sure, and explain to your child when they're old enough to understand, at home we will speak this language, blah, 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 blah. At school you will be speaking English, blah, 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 blah. When the grandparents come, yet you will be speaking, or we will be speaking this other language. So it's important to teach children, not just do it natural, not just speak to them the different languages. You need to explain to them if you want to raise your children bilingually or trilingually. It's also important to be careful not to criticize either language, right? Or to put down just because, one language might be more prestigious than another, or one language might come from a developed country and the other one might come from an undeveloped country. So be careful not to add messages to the languages, or negative adjectives, if you will. So make sure that you tell your children that, yes, you speak two languages, and you do that with pride. You teach them to be proud of the two languages that they're speaking. The challenges that parents face raising bilingual children, I'll start from the bottom here. Whoops. Oh, no. Is this where I was? No, go back. One, okay. Down, this one. Busy parents are tired, and it's hard to be consistent. We come home, we're tired, and right? I'll tell you one thing quickly that I think is going to be valuable. My youngest daughter of 3 was 12, and she wouldn't speak with me in Spanish. The oldest one did, because we always had a nanny at home, and the grandparents came and so forth. So the oldest one was completely fluent. Number 2 didn't care if she spoke one or the other. She didn't speak either one very well. She spoke whatever came out, that's what she said, and she made herself understood. Number 3 said, I will not speak in Spanish. If you want me to talk to you, I will talk in English. And if you want me to speak in Spanish, I'm not going to talk to you. Can I tell you something? At 12, she did not. She did not speak with me for a long time. And as a parent, you can imagine, and here's a marriage and family therapist, right? Here's a marriage and family therapist, and this is happening at my house, at home, in my family. It hurt my feelings. It nearly killed me because she wouldn't speak with me. And I knew she understood, and I know she could. But you know what was happening? And once I understood what was happening, I was able to make a switch. So number 1 was a straight A student. Number 2 was a B+ student, and she really did not care
She really did not care. My second child, ADHD, bright, very bright, but she really didn't care one way or the other. Number 3 was very shy, and she was afraid her sisters would mock her. And see, that's another thing. When you're bilingual, or when you're raising your children bilingually, they're afraid to make mistakes. You're likely to make a mistake at some point or another, whether it's in grammar or pronunciation, right? Are you with me? So she was afraid that her sisters would criticize her or would make fun of her. And that was the reason why, when we sat at the dinner table, she would not speak in Spanish. So how is this resolved? I won't tell you all the in-betweens. But what's happening today, and she's 23, number 3 is 23. Number 3 is considering getting her master's in special education. She's working with children. Of my 3 children, according to my mother, she's the one who speaks the most pristine Spanish. She speaks Spanish fluently. And because she's so afraid to make a mistake, her Spanish is perfect. It's perfect. So do not, I'm telling you this because you might run into these things, right? Kids might have tantrums. They might have a difficult moment, or they might be angry with you. And because they're angry with you, they're not going to give you what you most want. Are you with me? They're going to give you exactly what you hate or what you're resisting. So be patient. Be patient. But if you really want to raise your child speaking more than one language, you have to be creative. You have to be creative. Yes?
So in order to achieve that your child is now speaking perfectly Spanish, did you continue to speak to her?
Oh, I didn't care what language she spoke to me, and I continued speaking to her in Spanish. I continued, and I continued, and I continued. And can I tell you something? So at Christmas time, we had Spanish villancicos, right? In Spanish, which are I don't know how to say Christmas carols. So we had Christmas carols in English, but we also had Spanish villancicos, right? We had turkey at Thanksgiving. We had turkey at Thanksgiving, but we also had ham. Or we also had turkey, or we also had fish, or we also had whatever else. So instead of rejecting, I did both. I did both. I did both. I did both. I just had to learn to do both so that they would see that it was possible to have fun in both languages. That it was possible to sing in both languages. It was possible to do everything in 2 ways, in two different ways. Do you follow? Yeah. Okay, we're almost done, I think. Yeah. So, so here it is. This is really the last slide. As parents, we must be mindful that what messages are conveyed at home. So what is it that you're saying about languages and cultures, really? So that is being passed on. So it's important not to idealize one culture at the expense of the other. So be mindful to be accepting of all languages and cultures. It's important not to criticize what one does or what one does not understand. So if there are aspects of this culture that you do not understand, take the time to find out. Take the time to learn, but don't criticize it. Do not criticize it. I could give you many examples about that, but I think my time's up. What is this? Okay, so it's important as your kids get older not to impose values without offering explanations, especially children that are growing in this country where, they ask everything, they want to know everything, and if they don't learn it, they go to the internet and they find it there. So explain to your children, like, for example, this issue of when family or when friends or family came to my house, it was important for my children to say, hola, and give them one kiss. In your household, it may be 2 kisses, or it may be a handshake, or it may be a bow, or it may be something else. But explain why you are expecting this. It's very hard for teenagers, especially, to do that. All right. I think that's it. Positive communication. Again, communication. And do it lovingly, and I'm sure you will be fine. All right. My cards are outside, by the way, and really my specialty is marriage and family therapy, not neurology. So this is your time, and I'm happy to take questions.
We can take your questions.
Hi there. I just had a brief question about language delay.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? Is it just delay in learning vocabulary? Is it delay across the board, including reading, writing, and understanding as well?
Okay, I think that's a very. Can you hear me? I think that's a very important question and not an easy to answer. I work for the school system, and I'll tell you something. I work very directly with school psychologists and counselors and special educators. I think that what I mean by language delay might be the fact that your child is not speaking or your child's vocabulary is a little bit more behind than his or her monolingual peers. It might be a 6-month delay. It may refer to a 6-month delay, no more than that. I think what is also important for you to understand is that if your child has a learning disability in one language, it is going to manifest in the other language. And I think through special education, your children will learn, but in a different way. That should not be a reason for you not to speak to your children in another language if they have a disability. At least that is my opinion. At least orally, they should be able to keep up with their siblings and what's going on in the family.
Hi, I'm Polish and I have a 5-year-old son. I have a question and kind of an advice that I heard from somebody that may be useful for other people. And that is that at some point I wanted to read to my son an English book, which I translated into Polish. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because he knew the book in English, so he very quickly realized it was wrong. But a parent in the classroom told me that actually you're not supposed to do that at all, because the children listen to you and they kind of make connections with the letters that they see, even though if they cannot read. So if the book is in English, only read it in English. If it's in Polish, only read it in Polish.
Okay, that's an excellent point. And also I think it depends on the age of the child. If it's a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, you can tell them whatever you want and they're not going to know. But if they are 5 or 6, where they're starting to read, some read earlier, but if that's the case, then you want to be careful because you don't want to confuse your child. I think the most important suggestion here is that you read to your child in whatever language you feel comfortable. It doesn't even matter if you're reading the book. You could be holding the book here and telling them whatever story. They're not going to know. As long as you do it in a loving way, it won't matter what language you're doing it in until, of course, they learn how to read or, they can catch you doing that.
And my question is, so my son is 5, makes a lot of mistakes in Polish, but we do speak Polish. How much do you want to correct your child so that they learn the language properly, but they don't get discouraged?
Well, that was my quandary as a mother when I had those 3 girls who looked at each other and compared each other. It's hard. It's hard. I think what saved me also was that when they went to high school, I think someone's calling you. When they went to high school, they took Spanish, or actually in middle school, they took Spanish in school. So I think once they learned the grammar at school, they were able to correct themselves. And you're right about that. You don't want to, put your child down by correcting them time and time and time again. Your child is 5. He's still very young. So it's a balance, and it also depends on the personality. Yes.
Another question that connects with what she's saying. We have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so 2 different levels in the situation. But the 6-year-old, the problem is they have school in English all the day long. Plus, my husband is English and I'm Italian, so American, so I'm Italian. So they prefer English.
Of course.
My language, Italian, I'm the only one who speaks and the only one who tries to speak. So often they say, I'm tired, I don't want to answer you in Italian, and you understand English, so don't lie, because I try to say, I don't understand you.
Okay.
They say, you do.
So this is my suggestion. I think you and your husband need to decide. I think you and your husband, and this is very important because this applies to other things, and thank you so much for bringing that up. That's a very common issue. I think you and your husband need to decide when it is that the family will speak Spanish. So, I mean, Italian. So it may be only at lunchtime. I'm sorry, only at breakfast or only at dinner or only when we go to, I don't know, on Saturdays or Saturdays and Sundays, so that the children know what to expect, but you're going to need your husband's support to do that. So it may be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It may be only at lunch or at dinner, so that the kids expect that, if that's what the family, if what you decide.
And he's obviously able to speak Italian. He use Italian or not? Because for the
Okay.
rules that you have to speak
Yes.
your language,
Yes.
we have, he speaks
Yes.
English, I speak Italian. That's very clear.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
kids have a preference.
So do you, I'm sorry, do you as a husband speak Italian or understand Italian? You do. Okay, even if you don't speak, as fluent as your wife, I think if the two of you have decided to raise your children bilingually, then you need to support each other and just decide when this will be, but consistently and reliably, so that the children, if they say, Daddy, I'm too tired to do this, and it's dinner time and I'm too tired to do this, well, you're going to say, honey, this is the rule at home. We're speaking Italian at dinner. Or we're speaking Italian when we go to breakfast on Saturday or Sunday, or, so I think it's important to, for both parents to be in agreement and give the children the same message. It's either yes or it's no. If it's yes, then you decide when.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Nadine, and I have 3 kids. I relocated here 13 years ago. Now my oldest one is a teenager, and they are bilingual in English and in French. And so what I would like to say is that first, don't get discouraged. So even if your child, he will go to an American school and he will get back to you and he will try to speak to you in English, you just continue speaking your native language. Because if you stop and you say, okay, let's speak English together, then he will lose your native language. But if you continue, with mom it's Spanish, with mom it's French, with mom it's Chinese, then
Yes.
he will keep the native language.
Yes.
The other suggestion I have is that you cannot do it alone. Because if it's only the language of the parents, that doesn't care. They say, this is your story, this is not mine, I live in the US, my friends are American, so I don't care. But if you bring your community and you work with your friends and you find a community, and they will understand that it's not only you who speak this language, but it's many, many people. And then they will get interested, because now I have teenagers. They speak to me in French because they understand that it's not only me. Because before, when they were little, they didn't want at all, because they say, I don't care, that's not my story. But if they are with friends and with other parents and they understand, okay, these teachers, these parents, they speak the same language, then I will make the effort, because it's not for my mom, it's because it's a community. So what I did, I'm very involved in a program for French speakers, and we do French on Saturdays. But they have the same program for all. There is a Polish school, on Saturday Polish school, there is Chinese, there is Japanese. So try to find a program in your community. You send your children there, they will understand it's not only my parents, it's all the children around me, and some mother, I like my mother, they have the same accent, so she's not an alien, she's just, okay, like the other mother around my friends, so it's okay. And again, when they get older, they become very proud of their culture, because it's not only, again, your family, they are the same as the other teenager around them. They have these 2 cultures, it's fine, they are special, and then they are proud of their culture. But if you try to do it alone, it's really tough. So I wanted to share my experience because it worked for me, so I hope it works for your family too.
Thank you.
Hello, I have a question.
Sure.
I wonder if you have any advice for situations where the grandparents who might come to take care of the kids speak a third language / dialect, and they feel more comfortable speaking in their dialect rather than the language that the mom speaks.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a very common theme. And I think if the grandparents are going to love the children in language X, and if they can bond, I would say there's no harm in doing that. They're only going to build a relationship with their grandparents. Perhaps they will not speak that language with anybody else in their lives, and that does not really matter. What will matter is that your children will have those memories of special time with the grandparents and vice versa. I don't think that does any harm to the children, really. How old are your children?
No, I don't have them yet.
Oh, you don't have them yet. Okay, all right. It's always, that's okay. Yeah.
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 Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the nice presentation. A lot of people argue that if the children don't master their mother tongue correctly, they are not able to to master another language. What do you say about that?
Say that again. When they don't.
A lot of people actually argue that if the children don't master their mother tongue, at the beginning, it's very difficult for them to master another language, a second language. What do you say about that?
Oh, that I want to speak here. I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're saying. If a child doesn't learn their mother's tongue when they're little, can they learn it later? I think that it is never too late. It might take us. What is the question?
You need to master one language first before you can master other languages. If you don't master one language more than the others, then you will be weak in every language. What do you think about that?
Well, I have to agree with you. It's better that you master one than you speak two or three in little bits and pieces. I think also the other thing is when you speak one language and you're fluent in one language and you go to school in that language and you educate yourself in vocabulary, when your vocabulary has expanded in language one, it'll be a lot easier for you to transfer what you have learned in language one to language two and to language three. If I have learned about, let's say, condensation, right? Clouds, rain, evaporation, condensation. If I learned the concept of condensation in Spanish, it's going to be a lot easier for me to learn about condensation in English or in French or in German because I'll have a base knowledge. So I think it is important, but come and see me when this is over because I want to speak with you a little bit more.
I actually have a follow-up question to, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for raising that point. So based on what you said just now, I have a 1-year-old daughter. So are we supposed to only speak to her in my native language, which is also my husband's native language, before she gets to a certain age, or do we speak to her in both languages?
Okay,
and also you mentioned that we are supposed to take on one language each person, so we play a different role. I speak English and he speaks Chinese.
Well,
so do we do that as well?
Well, I think this is a very important, a very significant question. If you want your child to associate you with English, please be aware that as she grows older, she might respond to you in English or might feel more comfortable responding to you in English. And you're not an English native speaker. What I would suggest is that you continue to speak to her, and she's only one. Both her parents speak Chinese. You are welcome to both. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to speak to her in Chinese. And as she gets a little older, she's inevitably going to see the TV, and she's going to watch Sesame Street, and all the other programs on TV. Do you know what I mean? So
yes.
Both of you can teach her English eventually before she goes to school, or a little bit before she goes to preschool. I'm sorry.
We were told very often by our parent friends that if your kid only speaks English by the time she goes to the daycare, she will be considered an outsider and she will be so shy to socialize with other kids.
Well,
so
here's what I suggest. I understand what you're saying. I would not divide it by mom does this and dad does that because of the two of you speak Chinese. What I would do is what I suggested earlier to somebody else is you can set Sunday mornings is when we will both teach you English. Sunday mornings is when you build the vocabulary in English. Or you can do it at, dinner time, or you can do it at breakfast. So she associates that she's learning a second language with a different intonation, with different sounds at a certain time of her day. But her natural environment, is Chinese.
I have a question over here. So I have a 15-month-old child, and I will go back to this dialect issue, which is I am from North Africa. I'm from Tunisia. And we speak our native language is Arabic, but not the Arabic. We have our own dialect. And our own dialect is mixed between Arabic and French.
Yep.
So we are in the situation where what should we teach our kid? French, Arabic, Tunisian, because this is the Tunisian. If you go to Tunisia, we mix everything between Arabic and. So what are we supposed to teach him exactly?
Okay.
My second question was.
Wait. Let me answer that question
Okay.
first because it's a loaded question. I think you and your husband have to decide what language you feel most comfortable speaking, reading, writing. I mean, you have to, and that is my recommendation is that you maintain that with which you are comfortable as your first language. Your child is going to learn English inevitably if she goes to school here. Now, this is where I think I try to allude to that, is that do you favor standard French versus Tunisian or versus the mix of what you speak? Tell me the name of your language.
It's the Tunisian.
It's Tunisian. Okay. So this is very important for you to decide. Are you going to, and I understand why you would favor teaching your child French, because it's a language that perhaps might be more, may have more use to speak standard French than Tunisian. I understand that. But your child can also learn French when she goes to school, in middle school, if you want her to learn French.
No, we are speaking Tunisian. Actually,
Oh,
it's more
good.
the opposite of, we are speaking Tunisian, and Tunisian is kind of loaded a word of French. In every sentence, there must be at least one or two words in French.
Okay.
So it's this confusion was, do we have to select those French words and take them out of the sentence that we want to give to him so that he can only learn Tunisian? Or should I just be as spontaneous? And because even if I'm going to read a book, all the books that I have for small kids are in English because we're here. Should I just pretend that I'm reading that book and come up with a story in Tunisian and select so that he can only hear me in the Tunisian Arabic word? Or can I just be as spontaneous, and it can be a mix of, which is what we do at home?
I think you love your child, you play with your child, you will cook with your child, you will go to the park with your child. Speak to your child from your heart. I think that's my advice. Speak to your child with your heart. Whatever language is comfortable for you, speak to your children with your heart. That is where you have the greatest vocabulary, the most spontaneity. The rest will come.
Okay.
The English will come, the French will come.
I have one last point, which is because so we are Tunisian at home, English because of the country, and he's in a home daycare with both nannies who only speak Urdu. And because of that, even though he is on a scale on 1 to 5, he's on 5 on the development skills, on scale on 1 of 5 on communication, he's on 0. He doesn't even say mom, dad. We know that we talk to him, he understands. Even to say no, we don't say no. We say le, which is the Arabic version. She says it in Urdu, we say it in English. And I'm like, he was for 1 year at home with us. And as of his second year, I said, okay, let him get into the world. But the problem, at this point, we see his kids that are his age, but can have more words than him. Are there any recommendation for us as a parent to, at least to help him to say mom and dad, which is something that we can wait to hear him say?
You are in a very tight, very difficult situation. If he's speaking Urdu, and if his caretaker is speaking to this child in Urdu, you're speaking to him in Tunisian. Come see me after this if you have a moment. Or take my card. I think our time is up.
Look, I think mine is very sort of practical. You talked about your own case, and I'm facing a similar situation, and I wonder if you have tips for teenager resistance to the home language, which happens to be French. Everybody else responds in French to mom and dad, but she wouldn't.
Well, you saw what I did. My child did not speak to me, truly. I would say for 10 months. 10 months is a long time in the life. Okay, So you heard what I said. It was very difficult for me to say, to accept that my child would not speak with me. She started speaking with me when I spoke to her one-on-one. So you have to really get to the root of this. You have to come to understand somehow the why. You cannot put an intervention in place without really knowing what the problem is. So make an effort with your wife to understand why is it that they're doing this. Are they angry with you? Oftentimes adolescents will not speak to us in the language we want them to when they're angry at us, right? That's a way of getting to us. So if they're angry, maybe, and they're adolescents, so they're complicated people. So I would say don't make up things to do without really understanding the why, or ask them, sit with them, be dare. You need to have courageous conversations with your children, and you need to understand why it is that they're doing this.
That's just one person though. It's one child.
Okay, well then you need to come to understand why.
Sorry, I've got a question about changing languages.
Yes.
The reason why I asked earlier the definition of bilingualism is that I grew up with two languages myself, and so I always used to think of my friends who were learning English at school as not being bilingual. To me, being bilingual was having a father and a mother of two different languages and learning two languages on an equal footing and being equally bad in both languages, which is what I've been my entire life. And so I very much differentiate between German or Arabic or other languages that I've learned later, which I don't speak necessarily very well, but where they're not the same to me. But my question was, I feel equally comfortable speaking English and French, and my wife's Finnish, so we have three languages at home, because I chose to speak French with the boys, and my wife's speaking Finnish. And so I feel comfortable because we're an English-speaking country, but we weren't for the first few years of my eldest. And I'm thinking that if we are to leave and to live in a non-English-speaking country, my inclination would be to speak English with them and to switch the language that I speak from French to English. What are your thoughts of a parent just from one day to the next just switching the language that they speak? Because I feel emotionally very comfortable speaking either or with them. Because I speak in English to the dog. And at first, it was bizarre to me to speak. I had the dog before the children, and it felt bizarre at first speaking French to the children, but to my eldest son, because I wanted to speak in English to him at first. But now I'm getting used to French, but I would feel comfortable going back to English.
I think humor is very important, and I think you need to do you think, and I don't have a straight answer for you. I think your children know you when you speak with them in French. So your children might as well think that you are French. You're the way you communicate with them. I wouldn't stop speaking with them in French just because you want them not to forget English. I wouldn't do that. How old are they?
They're 2.5 and 5.
They're very young. I think at that age, until they get to 7, as I said in the presentation, they have a lot of plasticity. They're able really to, as you learned 2 languages growing up, they can learn 2, they can learn 3. Well, and then they can learn 1 more. I don't know. Personally, I wouldn't advise you to change drastically from one day to another. I don't know that there would be any pluses on that. You could certainly introduce, what language you would like with them, but gradually, start reading books. Hey, Daddy speaks another language, and on Sunday mornings, I will speak to you in English only. And then on Sundays and Wednesdays, we'll play this game in English. And so, playfully introduce yourself as in a more gradual way, I would say.
I'm sorry, everyone. We have to end, but thank you so much, Pilar.
Oh, you're welcome.